Unbelievable, Bitcoin has broken through the sell wall and is smashing through the US dollar. Bitcoin hasn't just come close to the US dollar mark. It's actually shot right through it. It's massive. What's going on here? The Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of America, is pumping up the Bitcoin price. No joke. Jerome Powell steps up to the stage and says that Bitcoin is a competitor to gold. So, Bitcoin is getting the Knights move here and saying that it doesn't pose a threat to the US dollar at the same time. That triggered a Bitcoin pump, and this statement really packs a punch. At the same time, Putin steps up and says that Bitcoin can't be stopped anymore. Donald Trump is being indirectly pushed to create a Bitcoin reserve. He's really in a tight spot now. He's being pressured from multiple sides to create a Bitcoin reserve. Now, everything could actually happen pretty quickly. In the last 3 to 4 hours, a lot has changed geopolitically here. In France, the government is now on the brink of collapse, or has already collapsed, you could say. And several big personalities have now come forward and spoken out in favor of Bitcoin. We're looking at all these personalities and especially what these statements and events mean in the context of Putin. It's incredibly exciting what's happening right now. And it looks like we're seeing Bitcoin winning here, 2001. But first, we need to take a look at the Fed chair, Jerome Powell. Because Jerome Powell is probably one of the most powerful people in the world, someone who can crash or pump entire financial markets. And he just did that with a statement he probably didn't even realize he was making, but just casually mentioned it in an interview. But that statement really carries a lot of weight. Listen in.
You think that's a good idea. I don't think that's a happy birthday to anyone. 2001. People treat Bitcoin like a speculative asset, right? It's like gold, it's just like gold. Only it's virtual, it's digital. People aren't using it as a way to pay for things or as a way to store value. It's super volatile. It's not a competitor for the dollar, it's really a competitor for gold. That's really how I see it.
And that's crazy. The market has seen this as very, very bullish because it also means that the Federal Reserve probably doesn't have anything against Bitcoin, since they might be underestimating the power of Bitcoin here. He's just saying that it's not a means of payment. So it's not a threat to the US dollar. It's more of a speculative asset comparable to gold. And it's a competitor for gold. And that's also what Michael Saylor is talking about. Bitcoin is not a competitor to the US dollar. It could work as a means of payment. If it were a currency, it would be a direct competitor to the US dollar. Of course, not right now and so on, that's clear. But that's also the reason why Michael Saylor never talks about Bitcoin as a currency, because he knows exactly that if Bitcoin were a currency and if it were already functioning globally as a means of payment, then it would be a direct competitor to the US dollar. And that's what they want to avoid. And that's why Jerome Powell is in favor of Bitcoin. He equates it with gold. But on the other hand, he doesn't see it as a competitor to the US dollar. So he's signaling to the market that both can coexist. And also really important, when he equates gold and Bitcoin, he's legitimizing Bitcoin as a potential reserve asset. Central banks, including the Federal Reserve, hold gold in their central bank reserves. And if Bitcoin is equated with gold, it also means that Bitcoin is a potential candidate for the Central Bank of America to find a place in their reserves. You can see now how more and more big personalities can't ignore Bitcoin. They need to open up to Bitcoin because people are asking, hey, what's your opinion on Bitcoin? Are you pro-Bitcoin? Are you against Bitcoin? That means more and more people are basically being forced into it. We'll get to Putin and Russia in a moment and how that ties in with the latest statements, because what's going on right now is super interesting. But first, let's take a look at some other big personalities. Now we have the, mayor of Vancouver, which is a key city in Canada, saying that Bitcoin is the greatest invention in human history. He's even planning to implement a Bitcoin reserve strategy with Vancouver. And that's also the game theoretical play that's happening right now. Canada might not be fully open to Bitcoin yet, and the US maybe isn't either, but the provinces in Canada and the states in the US are starting to open up to Bitcoin now. More and more proposals are coming in, and this is forcing Donald Trump to pursue a Bitcoin reserve strategy. At the same time, we have the geopolitical games, and we'll come to how Putin could now force Trump to build up a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I said in the last video that the probability is becoming increasingly smaller that Donald Trump will open up to Bitcoin and introduce a strategic Bitcoin reserve. However, current events make it increasingly likely. It's so crazy that we might not have a choice but to do it, because if we don't, the economic damage could be massive. The mayor of New York is also speaking up now. Who's laughing at Bitcoin now? You all laughed at me. And who's laughing now because you're realizing that Bitcoin is winning right now? That means we have so many personalities who are now opening up to Bitcoin here. And this is happening all of a sudden because that's how it always is with Bitcoin. Something happens, and then suddenly like 10 things happen at once. What's happened in the last 24 hours is unbelievable. We have the Fed Chair Jerome Powell saying that Bitcoin competes with gold. We have Trump appointing a Bitcoin supporter as the new SEC chief. I made a video about that yesterday. President Vladimir Putin says that no one can ban Bitcoin anymore. We'll also take a look at the latest statements because I need to put a few things into context here. Then we have the Canton of Bern saying that they're looking into implementing Bitcoin mining into their energy policy. We have DZ Bank in Germany, which is opening up to trading Bitcoin in 2025. And then we actually have the AfD also opening up to Bitcoin and including it in their election program. The savings banks are also starting to open up to Bitcoin. And with the savings banks, just like with the states, it's always the same. They're being forced to deal with Bitcoin because of the rising price. And now you can see the difference. For example, the mayor, early Bitcoin supporter, can say, "I told you so. Now I must embrace it or miss a big edge." Now Putin makes it more exciting. And now all these catalysts are coming into play, so one after another is like, "Hey, sorry, I missed it, but now I have to open up to it, because if I don't, I'm going to miss out on a huge competitive advantage." And now we get to Putin, because that makes things even more exciting. If Putin gets involved in the Bitcoin game now too. I'll play the clip again, in case some of you haven't seen it yet. And then we need to talk about Putin, Russia, and Bitcoin again. This is a recent clip of him. He made these statements at a conference about 12 hours ago.
The share of the USA in the world economy is shrinking, which means that the influence of the dollar on global economic processes is also decreasing. That's why, naturally, we see processes involving other instruments like Bitcoin, where no one can prohibit its use. In 2001, no one could ban the use of other electronic payment methods because these are new technologies. Anything can happen with the dollar. These tools are going to keep evolving because everyone is looking to cut costs and make these tools more reliable. This is inevitable, and the dollar has nothing to do with it. But if we see that the use of the dollar is decreasing, if they do it themselves, they will be undermining the foundation of their own economic dominance. That's obvious, and I totally agree with you on that.
So, if you had to break it down into one sentence, what Putin is saying here is that the dollar is collapsing and Bitcoin is winning. That means what Putin is breaking down here. He's saying that the USA is losing influence more and more people want to move away from the US dollar. Even Russia wants to get away from the US dollar. But Putin is clearly saying, hey, I actually want to deal in US dollars. I want to trade in US dollars. I've always used the US dollar, and it's always worked out pretty well, roughly speaking. I actually want to deal in US dollars, but hey guys, you've excluded me from the US dollar. My assets are sanctioned here, and I can't do any international trade with the US dollar anymore. Trump even says he's going to impose tariffs on everyone who stops using the US dollar and so on. That doesn't make any sense at all. On one hand, he says he's imposing tariffs, and on the other hand, he's basically banning Russia from using the US dollar, or he's not outright banning it, but he's sanctioning their assets, like Russia's US Treasury bonds. So that has led to a massive loss of trust. That means Putin would like to keep doing that. But he's being sanctioned here, too, by the US side. At the same time, Donald Trump threatens other countries that if they don't use the US dollar, they'll face 100% tariffs and so on. And then Putin also said that there are new technologies like Bitcoin that can't be stopped. Lieutenant Babbitt, who's supposed to ban Bitcoin, those are his values. You can see here that on a global level, all the nations have understood Bitcoin. Putin understood it, Donald Trump. Yes, perhaps his team of advisors understood it. Donald Trump is trying to understand it. I'm also very, very sure that the Chinese understand Bitcoin. All the big players have understood Bitcoin. And what's happening now is what a lot of people have secretly thought. All the tactics that we've seen, like for example, different countries have closed themselves off against Bitcoin. China mining ban, Russia also initially closed itself off with sanctions and then said, okay, Bitcoin is not really legal and so on. Now we're seeing a complete 180-degree turn everywhere, And I'm making a prediction, China is going to open up massively to Bitcoin as well. We've already seen that in China, Bitcoin is now being considered property, as in ownership. And here, the regulations are being massively relaxed. I think this is going to keep going. In Russia, things are going to loosen up even more now. And then the news will be like, wow, we've been building up Bitcoin reserves here for 2 or 3 years. I don't know if it will be Russia, if it will be China, which nations it will be, but not 100%. You can't say 100%, but I really agree with Snowden on this, that this year a major country will come out and announce that it has secretly built up massive Bitcoin reserves. I'm not expecting it to be made public this year. I expect it to be made public next year. And then the stones will roll like dominoes. Then one nation will come to the next and say, either we need to open up to Bitcoin now, or we admit that over the last few years we've already opened up to Bitcoin and secretly told people that we were closing ourselves off from it. But we've really just kept Bitcoin hidden from our population. But on a state level, we've massively opened up to Bitcoin, built Bitcoin mining infrastructure, mined Bitcoin, and so on. I can totally see that happening. Donald Trump is indirectly pushed towards Bitcoin. He must create a strategic Bitcoin reserve as other countries, like Russia, embrace it. Putin understands Bitcoin, and there's no more debate. In 2021, Putin's actions suggest he's likely acquiring Bitcoin. A leader wouldn't declare Bitcoin can't be banned without investing in it. Such statements imply behind-the-scenes accumulation. While there's no evidence of Putin's Bitcoin holdings, the rising hash rate during the bear market suggests strategic moves. You only make a statement like that, a bullish statement, if you've already been filling your pockets behind the scenes. Of course, there might not be any evidence for that. I don't know how much Bitcoin Putin has in his wallet or anything like that. There's no proof for that. But you could also see during the bear market how the hash rate kept rising. No one could explain this except that perhaps states were engaging in negative mining. So they were basically mining over the market price to accumulate no KYC Bitcoin, which means acquiring anonymous Bitcoin. And at the same time, we're seeing global unrest, like the government collapsing in France and the government falling apart in South Korea. These are all indicators that point to more money printing. Global chaos, that's what Larry Fink and BlackRock always say. Global chaos leads to Bitcoin benefiting and winning in the long run because Bitcoin thrives in chaos. Bitcoin is chaos, a crisis asset. When there are crises, when there's chaos, Bitcoin can clearly be the beneficiary of that. We are now seeing the Bitcoin nation-state game in full effect, and it will be exciting to see what the next moves will be. What is currently taking place here is something like German chess, and no mistakes can be made, neither Putin, nor Donald Trump, nor other rulers. Everyone must now make sure that they position themselves very, very cleverly strategically. Only Germany and Europe are likely to be the clear losers. Some entrepreneurs are opening up, but Germany won't be decisive. They'll be left behind, watching others with Bitcoin strategies. It'll be interesting to see if the national strategy emerges soon. They'll be left behind. A Bitcoin reserve strategy may soon emerge. Dennis Porter predicted it would happen at the state level unless Trump acts quickly, as time is running out. And soon we see a state Bitcoin reserve. Dennis Porter said it will happen at the state level unless Trump issues an executive order, as time is running out. Other nations may front-run Bitcoin, and you don't want to be last. Dennis Porter also said back in 2020 that it's definitely going to happen at the state level, unless Donald Trump issues an executive order, like a state of emergency or whatever law, like a bypass law, because with an executive order, he could relatively quickly implement this Bitcoin reserve, so to speak, because time is really running out. Every minute that goes by without it being introduced, other nations will likely front-run Bitcoin and fill their pockets. And you definitely don't want to be the last one in this rat race. If you want to buy Bitcoin and get in on the global Bitcoin game, I recommend 21 Bitcoin, the easiest way to buy Bitcoin in Europe. Here you can use the code Bitcoin Hotel to get up to 20% off the fees. Super easy, totally recommend it. And now please leave a subscription for the channel. It's really important that we gain traction now, that people understand what's at stake here, how crucial Bitcoin is, and that Bitcoin is coming into the mainstream. It's super important to engage with Bitcoin right now. You don't have to subscribe, of course, but that would help the channel, that would help Bitcoin, and that would just move the Bitcoin community forward overall. Sending lots of greetings and sunshine to cold Europe from El Salvador. See you later. Peace out.